as long as you believe in the work and do the work.
But first of all, I don't want to be your poster child.
Solidarity is critical to getting this done. Allies are important.
Show me that I provide value to the business.
Is just one more way that some have tried to diminish, dismiss, and disavow the reality of systemic racism.
Be with us in crisis as well as celebration, but be consistent about it. Janet, I have a question for you as a speechwriter. You've been the executive communications and the executive speechwriter for the CEO of UPS, prior CEO, and you are one of the leading thought leaders around speeches, especially as we think about how do we connect with our audiences from a DEI perspective, and connecting with our audiences in that way. So how do we incorporate DEI comms into speeches so we are meaningful and they're not performative?
Great question. For a time, I was one of fewer than 5, maybe the only Black speechwriter working in the Fortune 100 at the C-suite level. And there's a reason for that. Many leaders think the only way a speechwriter can be their voice is if they share their characteristics. And let's face it, there are not a bunch of folks that look like me running Fortune 100 companies. But that's not just a problem for speechwriters. It's a problem for leaders. They aren't communicating exclusively with people who look and think like them. And when they're delivering a speech written by someone who looks like them to an audience traditionally marginalized by people who look like them, well, there's a whole lot of room to say stupid shit. Now, having a speechwriter of color might help that. But the way to minimize the chance of saying stupid shit is to be authentic. No matter who is writing for you, connect the audience's diversity story to your diversity story. And every leader, every person has a diversity story. Now, I don't mean center your story. I mean connect on things that you share. Let me give you a quick example. I had to write a speech for a CEO to give to a Latino organization. He was, of course, not Latino. In the speech, he talked about his own very humble beginnings. He spoke honestly, acknowledging the real problems in the Latino community, not just the ones that his company could virtue signal about fixing. And then he talked about working beside Latinos at every point on his rise to the top. He told their stories, and in doing so, made clear where the insights that he was sharing came from. His speech was authentic because it was his story connected to the audience's story. And he got a standing ovation. The key is to find the connection. And if you don't have one, then you say that too. But you say why. Acknowledge that it's a problem and you say what you're going to do about it. You tell the truth. You make yourself vulnerable. You center the audience's story and explain your story in light of theirs. Hiring a speechwriter of color, well, that's a pretty good idea too.
Completely agree. And having people review your speech in front of, if there's a representation within your team, of the audience you're trying to connect with, to ensure that everything is appropriate.
And if there's not somebody that you can show it to, that's a problem you need to solve. The thing is just let somebody else give you insight on it. That's the joy of diversity. That's the value of diversity within communications.
And I love your point about how centering the audience while still having the leader be able to tell their own story, but doing it in a way that you're not centering the leader. And that's something for another video, is talking about majority coding and not centering the company and the leader who's speaking, but instead the audience that we're trying to connect with.